Quick rundown. Required 1/2-inch drill, either a crescent wrench or adjustable pliers, slotted screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, tape measure, razor knife. Scissors will work. Razor knife does some extra stuff for you. Another optional tool is an impact driver. Really good for driving the screws in, but you can do the whole install with a 1/2-inch chuck drill. All right, quick rundown on what comes with the kit. This does not include the dispenser, which has the ancillary stuff that comes with it. Power supply, drain line. That's just about it with the dispenser. So drain bucket, getting that out of the way so you can see a little bit better. These are 2 little jugs of glycol that go with this XL cleaning kit. I will get to the explanation of how it is installed in the video. Get that out of the way. We can see a little bit better yet again. And then we've got the tap kit, which varies based on the number of lines that you've purchased. I'm gonna reach over here, take this bad boy, get it out of the way. Then what we've got is we've got all the supplies that are right here. We have line clamps, tools that come with it. We give you the hole saws that you need, the Phillips screwdriver you need for these line clamps that are here. I'm not going to go into detail of exactly what these are. There's a frame at the beginning that'll show the names and what we call them. Each step of the installation video, I'll show you what you need for that step, and then moving on to the next, what you need for that step. All right, I've taken the doors off the cooler as the next step, not because this is what you need to do on the installation. It's going to make it a lot easier for me to show you what I'm doing, how I'm doing the install and the rest of it. So as I said earlier, you can see that this cooler is super beat up. There's old beer lines. It was a rental cooler. People used it for demos, all kinds of stuff. So again, I'm going to say that you're going to be putting a beautiful new fancy piece of equipment on a beat up old cooler like this. One of the risks that you run is that you get the install completely done, you followed all the steps, and the cooler goes bad. If the cooler goes bad with the dispenser installed on it, if it's not under warranty, it's a couple $1,000s to get the refrigeration fixed on it to use the same cabinet. It's almost the same cost as a new cooler. Then you have to go through the process of uninstalling the dispenser and reinstalling it on a new cooler. So again, if you really want to, keep following along with me and I'm going to show you what to do. Like I said, it's going to work great in the end, and as long as the cooler works, it's going to function forever. So the next step is to remove the towers and all of the old stuff that's inside the cooler here. The towers themselves, you'll see in here, these are for mock-up purposes. I've got single towers installed. Inside I have 4 beer lines. So if there's people that are all about congruity and trying to catch little bugs in videos, these are single faucets. For example purposes, everything that I'm going to do is going to be the same to remove almost any style of faucet, no matter how many lines are attached to it. So step 1 is you have to get the collar up around the base of the tower. If it's an H tower, it's still going to have collar down there. It may not have a collar on it, and you'll be looking at the fasteners that are keeping the towers attached to the cooler. Some coolers have screws that are just threaded right into the top of the cooler here. Some of them have through bolts that go all the way through that have nuts that need to be grabbed from the underside with a pair of pliers. So if you have those, you'll need to get the appropriate driver for the type of fastener you have on the tower that is installed on your cooler. Sometimes it's fillet, sometimes they're square head. If they are stripped out or rusted, which can be the case on a lot of old coolers, you may have to get a drill bit and drill the head of the screw and break it loose that way, pop the tower off, and leaving the screw embedded in the top of the cooler. In this case, these are just attached with tech screws that are using the 1/4-inch driver. The step that you want to do before you do anything with the towers is make sure that all of the CO2 is disconnected, the kegs are out of the cooler. If you're doing work in the cooler and you're going to be putting the kegs back in, highly stress that the kegs need to be refrigerated while you're working on it. So if you have a walk-in cooler, you can drag them to, put them in there. If you cannot refrigerate the kegs while you're working on them, you're not going to ruin the beer itself, but you're going to have to wait 24 hours after completion of the install to allow the kegs to get chilled back down. If it's really cold outside, you can put them outside. It may not take a full 24 hours, but for this purpose, we're going to say the kegs come out during installation and are not refrigerated. They need to be refrigerated for 24 hours before they're at the appropriate temperature. If the kegs are warm, you're going to have foaming and all kinds of weird issues when you first start up the system. So in this case, CO2 is disconnected. There's no kegs in here. All the lines and stuff are still hooked up. So I'm going to take a pair of tubing cutters, specific to cutting PVC, all different kinds of stuff. You can use just about any type of cutter. The lines that are going to be in there are soft vinyl. Diagonal cutters will work. Some people have used different types of shears. So in this case, I'm just going to reach down here. I'm going to cut the lines from each one of the tower, and that's just the first step. So I grab both lines on this side, give them a cut. This one here, give them a cut, and now the towers are free to be removed. So in this case, I'm going to take the screws out for this tower. Again, most towers have through bolts that go all the way through into the bottom. They require grab a nut on the bottom with the wrench and then drive them all the way through. These here, as I said, just have hex screws that are screwing them down to the top of the cooler. Once the tower is removed, you see the beer lines attached to it. There sometimes is a flexible hose that goes up inside the tower that is attached to a manifold in here that blows cold air up into the tower, trying to keep the faucet cold. One of the challenges with a keg cooler with the standard tower is if there's no positive circulation of refrigerated liquid, inside the tower, no matter how you try, it gets really warm, and the faucet head itself gets really warm. So the faucet head is sitting out at ambient temperature. That's why you'll see foam always at the start of a keg cooler pour in most traditional faucets on keg boxes. So this tower is out. Put it to the side. Tower number 2 is removed. That's taken off to the side. Next step is going inside the cooler, removing everything, and then going through the cleaning process before we even start to do any installation. The inside of your cooler is going to vary in how it's set up, how the gas lines are ran, what type of regulator it is, if the regulator's outside the cooler, if you even have a CO2 manifold in there. The purpose of this step is to show that what happens after cutting the towers and removing is to remove all the old equipment from inside the cooler that was associated with the old system. I'm just going to take this stuff here, right in the trash. This step is going to include using the 3.5-inch hole saw, the 7/8 hole saw, the silicone little collar, insulation, the tape, the metal discs I have out here to show you, screws, the power supply clamp. These are 1/8-inch loop clamps, 2 grommets, and a screw clamp there for the drain for the dispenser. The dispenser comes with the dispenser itself with the beer lines attached to it, the 2 cooling lines, the drain line, comes with a tap display, the power supply, and then the nozzles you see screwed here on the top, as well as the rubber gaskets that go in between the keg coupler and the beer line here and the beer nut that's attached to the end of this. Next step I'm going to show you is how to insulate and prepare the dispenser. All right, you can see on the dispenser here, I have we have lines coming out the left side, lines coming out the right side. Coming out the left side is lines 1 and 2. They're labeled on the ends. Included with these, underneath the insulation here, is the cooling loop that is going to get connected to the cooling kit that you're going to install inside the cooler. What you'll notice is that the insulation stops evenly on the ends of both of these sides of the dispenser. I have in the corner here the insulation tape and then the black vinyl tape. I am going to take the dispenser and I'm going to make sure that the nozzles that are on the top are removed. We also call these the cup couplers. There is a wing nut down here at the bottom that should be just about finger tight. Turn it counterclockwise and these will come off. I'm going to set them to the side. Also going to remove the little tray that's in the top here. Removing this so that I can flip the dispenser completely upside down on its body here. I'm going to show you the best practice for insulation to install in the hole that we're going to drill and to be able to go through that grommet. So I'm going to move the camera just a little bit here so that you can get a little bit of a view of me taking the 2 beer lines. I'm going to hold them in my hands just gently, making sure that I'm lined up. If you actually look this way, you can see that the center line of the dispenser here is lined up with this drain. This drain is going to be going down in the front or closest to the server part of the hole, and the beer lines need to go with it. So if you see, I have them lined up centered on that center line, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and I'm going to push them down into the dispenser body. So do you see how they are pushed down in there, and they are going to be where the insulation is below the chassis or inside of the chassis. So now that I have them kind of lined up where I want them, that image you could see it was a little off center. So now this is put together, and I'm holding it together where I think is lined up just right in front of this drain barb that's behind me back here. So I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to tape them right here. Since they are pushed into the chassis, I can actually let them flop up and over. As long as I'm holding where they were, where I was gripping before, it's going to go into the same spot. So you see here that they're meeting quite nicely. I have them held just like this. So I'm going to take a piece of the vinyl tape here, and the reason I'm going to tape it is so if I let go of it or drop it, I can still have it the right lengths on the left side and the right side. So I've got a little piece of tape. We just need one wrap, just like this. So a nice wrap. You're going to use your razor knife or your scissors to make sure to be away from the lines, give it a nice even cut. And you're going to wrap the tape under it. This is where the double-sided adhesive tape comes in. It is sent in a strip here, and what you're going to want to do is you'll want to kind of put a piece on this side just like this, just down to where your tape is, and then it will rip. And you can also see that as I'm taping, I'm exposing the adhesive back to it. This adhesive back is very sticky, and if you're trying to wrap with it and you're not kind of working this back with it, if you fully expose it and it sticks to itself, it can get kind of difficult. So I'm going to do the same on the back side, and what we're doing is we're putting just a little bit of insulation in that gap in between where the beer lines meet. So again, I've got this taped on the back. Let me flip these up. You can see that I'm coming down just through that little crease there. The razor knife also works in this position instead of tearing. Really be careful not to cut the lines, so I'm just going to come through, cut it. And then now you can take a piece of the insulation. You're going to wrap all the way behind. So I'm going to go all the way under, all the way down to the end of my tape. And my tape is only that one width of tape wrap wide. So that kind of sets your length for how much you need to insulate, because this is actually going to be sticking in to the top of the cooler here, and we don't need it to be too big or too long because it can make the installation a little more difficult. So I'm coming right through the little Y there, around to this side, all the way over the crease and all the way down to where it lines up with the end of the tape. So take my little razor knife, give it a nice little cut, and then you just take the rest of it. You have this laying down, kind of go over the top of everything, and then I'm just going to give it one full wrap here. As I'm going, you can see that I'm kind of working the backer off the insulation because it's really sticky. So I started here, went once around. I'm going to go around one more time, making sure to take the backer with me. There we go. So you can see I'm going around again. Exposing more of this sticky adhesive. Get to here, I'm going to tear it off this time, and you can see that I've made a nice little insulated spot there for the beer lines to come together. Next, I'm going to take some more of the tape. I'm going to cut a piece, and I'm going to go over the top again. So I'm going to start on the back side, come over the top, and lay right there. This is also really sticky, so you just kind of be careful. Razor knife, cut a strip. This is about a 6-inch strip here. I'm just going to go a little bit of it on the back, stretch it over the top here, give a little bit of protection on the piece of insulation I have here. What this tape will do is it'll keep it from splitting open and anything like that if you're moving it around. So I've got my tape. Don't have to be super tight, just kind of going all the way around it, all the way around it again, kind of laying nice and flat. And then going to cut it off in the front. Now I'm going to cut two 8-inch strips of tape. There's one. And I'm going to go right here, coming around the back, making sure it's laying nice and flat. Take another strip. If you're in doubt of what 8 inches is, you can go longer. You're just going to end up overlapping the tape a little bit more. So again, another piece here, wrapped under, stretched tight, laid nice and flat. So that's all you have to do for insulation right there. We give you lots of tape. This stuff's really cool to have around. Nice, stretchy, good sticky stuff. So put that in your little storage spot. But on the insulation side, we're done on the dispenser. The dispenser now, as you can see, I push it in there and it fits underneath the chassis. And then if you look, I'm gonna move this just a little bit better of an angle here. You can see the barb in front of it. This is lined up in the center line with the drain line barb right there. So now that we're insulated, the next step is to put the drain line on, and I'm going to move the camera so I can show you that a little bit better. Show you how to put the drain line on, which is the next step. The drain line is a 10-foot chunk of sani tubing here. This is designed to fit on the barb that's in the cooler, or in the dispenser, excuse me, and then a standard screw clamp. The screw clamp, you may need to open it up. I'd go just about as wide as it'll go, so when it fits over the drain hose, it has room to slide over the barb easily. I'll show you real quick. From the front side, it's hard to see a little bit. Once I insulated my lines together, you can see that it sits down nicely inside the chassis here. The drain barb, which I'm going to flip up so you can see, is right here, so it's all lined up. So when we drill the hole, it's going to fit nice and sit on the dispenser. So to install the drain line, I'm going to flip my dispenser up. That's a little precarious if you were trying to install it at home this way, because it's going to want to tip over. I am going to do it though so you can see what I've got going on here. So the drain line goes right on this barb here. Putting the hose clamp on, be aware of what your dominant hand is. I'm going to put it on this way. Since my right hand, I'm going to bring the screwdriver in from this side to tighten it. If you're left-handed, you'll want it face the other way so that you can work on it from this side. So going over the hose, pushing it over the barb, kind of working it on there, sliding it into position, and you can see that the clamp is in the spot where I can get my tool in there fairly easily. You can I just slowly tighten it down. Once you get a little gription on there, as it shrinks, you might have to rotate it. Go nice and tight, and then now the drain line's on. The dispenser sitting behind the two holes where the towers used to be for display purposes of how it looks like the hole that's here and the hole that's here. If we hadn't have brought the lines together and insulated them, you may have been able to get away with dropping these right down in these holes. That is something you want to avoid. If you run this down this side and this down the other hole, the drain line requires an additional hole to be drilled in the middle for it to get through the cooler. Then you have the dispenser locked down into the top of the cooler with the 3 separate holes with 3 separate systems going through there, the power on one side, the cooling kit on the other, the drain in the middle. I would stay away from running it through, not through the center hole of the dispenser like we've done it here. This hole on the left is 3 inches. It's too small to put the grommet that we supply with the dispenser in it. But as you can see, it's been foiled around. The edges are not sharp. So if you wanted to, and you felt like you were comfortable with it, you could drop the dispenser and the drain line right through this hole, run the power through there, and be ready to rock and roll without the next step of drilling the 3.5-inch hole that you need in the top of the counter. This is not always an option, and the bushing that we provide doesn't fit in there. So if you are going to use that hole, you take it upon yourself to make sure that it's nice and protected, that there's no sharp edges, and that everything will fit. In this example, I'm going to show drilling a new hole in the center where we want the dispenser here, in the center of these two, or you really can drill it anywhere, but I'm going to just show you laid out in the center. The other two holes, in this case, there's a little disc, stainless steel disc, another one here. We include a tube of silicone. They can literally be silicone down over the top of it. So you put a bunch of silicone on this, stick it right over the top of this hole, covering the screws. Same with this one right here. Now, where we have it laid out, those would probably land on the inside footprint of the dispenser. So we'll be covering those when we're done. You don't have to reuse any of the holes. If you wanted the dispenser all the way at the left, all the way at the right of the cooler, you can do that if you'd like to. So I'm gonna take these discs out of the way. One thing to note when you start laying out is that the drain line here is going to be in the front of the hole that we drill from the server side. So as you can see, this is going to be the front of the dispenser, or the server side of the dispenser, and the drain line starts at 9 inches. So on the counter, I want to just mark right here just for visual. So this is 9 inches. So if we wanted the front of the dispenser lined up with the front of the cooler, we would need to start our 3.5 inch hole behind this line where the front of the hole would land it to the 9 inch mark. So the fact that it's a 3.5 inch hole, half of 3.5 inches is 1.75 inches. So back from that, from the 9 inch mark, we would be at 10.75 to the center of our hole saw cut for the dispenser. Now that puts the front of the dispenser right at the front edge of the cooler, and we recommend leaving some room in front of it to cue glasses up to wipe down so the dispenser isn't just barely hanging off the edge. So we recommend a minimum of 3 inches. 3 inches seems to get you to be able to fit a pint glass there. You could do 4 inches if you want. That's even more room. That's like the standard bar mat in front of it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay it out for 4 inches. The other thing to make sure before you drill your hole is when laying out how far away the dispenser is from the front edge of the cooler itself, you have to realize what's inside the cooler and what's above the or below the top of the cooler. So in this case, we have this hole that's on the left here. It is just barely in front of the fan and refrigeration assembly that is inside this cooler on the top. A lot of coolers have everything oriented to just to the left side so that the top is completely open and you kind of drill a hole wherever you want. This version, if you look down inside here, the fan assembly is just barely behind the hole here on the left-hand side. So I need to make sure that when I lay it out that I don't run into that. So when I was talking about maybe putting 4 inches in front of the dispenser earlier, in this case I cannot do that because it is going to run into where the fan assembly is in there. So that fan assembly, it kind of veers, you know, back in this way, but not very substantially. So the center of this is clearing it, and the center of that is at 11.5. So I can go over here and I can see that the shroud is going kind of this direction. So I would be clear in this space here. So we have our 10.75 mark, which I have lined up right here for our 3.5 inch hole. I want to give us, I don't know, 2 inches in front of the dispenser because I know I have clearance for that. So I'm going to make this 12.75. So I'm going to go 12.75. I'm just going to be centered in between these holes to give us the best chance to cover it. And you would be centered on the outside of the holes. So from outside to outside, it's approximately 21 inches. We've got 21 inches, half of 21 is 10.5. So I'm going to be here. So the center of my hole is going to be there at the correct length of 12.75 from the front. So that is right where I'm going to be drilling my 3.5 inch hole. Now drilling a 3.5 inch hole in stainless steel can be very difficult if you do not follow some simple tips and tricks. So I'm going to set the camera up, get you a little bit better angle here for where the hole is going to line up, and show you some stuff on how to best practice drill a hole in stainless steel. All right, you can see my little center line here. This is for the hole itself. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the hole saw that we provided, the new 3.5 inch hole saw here. You're going to want to line it up on the target of where you're going, and you need to take the Sharpie that we've provided you. Going to get that centered right where you want it, lining it up just like this, and you're going to trace around the outside of this. And the reason that you're going to do this is because we've provided a really sharp pilot bit for you to be able to what we call kind of cookie cutter the line here. Stainless steel is very difficult to drill, especially if you let it get hot. So the way to keep it from getting hot is not to go too fast and not to push too hard. So in the kit that we have included a double-ended 1/8" drill bit. One end is designed to be used on the top of the cooler here to get your nice, get you some holes drilled in the outside here to make it quite a bit easier to drill the hole saw through. So I'm lined up there. I'm pretty happy with where I'm lined up. One thing to do to check before you start drilling is take your arbor with the pilot bit in it. You're going to chuck it up in your 1/2" drill, and then you're going to drill right in the center, nice and slow. So I'm applying quite a bit of pressure downwards, but going super slow. Because if I go too fast right away, the stainless is going to harden, and then you won't be able to drill it and you'll ruin your bit. So I've got this, making sure I'm straight up and down. The inside of the cooler usually is a little bit easier to drill. So now applying some pressure, we're all the way through. Attaching the hole saw to the arbor here, I'm just going to thread it on. Line it up with the little pins that keep it locked in position, run the stopper nut up, and then I'm just going to go really, really slowly right here, and we're going to see where the line ends up. So I'm not pushing down at all, so it's going to be a little bit of wobbling. The thing to be very careful of when you are drilling with a large, powerful drill and a large hole saw is it's going to want to spin on you. So you have to brace yourself. I'm very used to drilling holes. I would not recommend having your body in this position. I would kind of get up on your drill, make sure that the drill is kind of braced against your body, and you're holding it and you're just applying light pressure to start. So you can see I've made a little bit of a groove right where the hole saw is actually going to drill. So it's just inside my line. I'm going to chuck up my 1/8" pilot bit here, and I'm going to drill along this groove. I'm going to drill a little hole, probably about every 1/4 inch or so. You can, depending on how hard the stainless is, you can't drill too many holes along the outside here. What it's doing is the little drill bit is removing the majority of the material so that the large drill just has to barely work to cut the little bits in between of it. So I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to drill a bunch of holes in here, and I'll come back and drill the hole through it. All right, I've zoomed out so that you can see kind of how I brace myself while I'm drilling this hole. I have drilled a bunch of little 1/8" holes right on the inside line there where the groove was. I am getting prepared to drill this. Note that this drill is very powerful, and the hole saw has a lot of surface area to catch, especially on these little drills we've had here. So if you don't have any experience using large hole saws, they can be very dangerous. They can break your wrist. They can break the pilot bit, scoot all the way across the top of the cooler. So just know that this part is probably the most difficult part of the installation, and you want to take your most time, maybe practice with them, get comfortable with it. And if you don't like it, you can buy one of the keg coolers from us that's already got one installed. We could come install one on there for you, do a long draw, whatever. So to start, I'm going to get my pilot bit in there. I'm going to be nice and square, and I'm going to brace my body against my drill like this. And I've got it held so it can't go this way, and this so it can't kick and spin my wrist. I'm gently holding here, knowing that if it spins, it's going to rotate that way. So I have my hand loose so it can spin out, and I can just let go of it. All right, we are drilled through. The inside of this cooler is made out of a softer material than the stainless steel. Some coolers have stainless steel on the internals as well, which makes them hard to drill. What you would do in that point, you would use your pilot bit to drill all the way through. You would drill the top of the cooler just how we did with the little cookie cutter little mini drills, pop right through it. You would then go inside and you would drill all the little holes coming up using the same pilot hole that was from the top, making sure that you put the hole saw in there. You give it a couple turns so you see where you need to drill your holes, and then you drill it from the bottom. But in this case, we have a cooler that is of a type of stainless steel that is a little bit easier to drill. And now you will see that the grommet that we have 3D printed for you, it's going to slide right in through the top, and then there's a nut that goes on from the bottom and tightens it down. All right, dispenser insulated, drain line on, hole drilled, grommet in. Next step is to put the beer lines through and the drain line through. So the dispenser is going to want to flip over when you do this, so I lay it on its back. I start with the beer lines and holding on to the base here, you're just going to start kind of tucking everything individually into the grommeted hole here. Got all the lines in. So kind of straighten them out, get to where it is holding the dispenser safely. And then remember, the drain line is going to be in the front or on the server side. So I've got the drain line here. The drain line is going to get pushed in the grommet. Down like this. At the same time, you're going to bring your power supply cord, undo it. We call this a 6-foot extension. You don't want to pull super hard on this. Now it is clipped in, but you could rip the, if you really pulled on it, you could rip the power supply connector out there. I'm going behind everything. I'm not tight, so I'm leaving some room in here, and I'll show you what we do with that. So I'm literally coming this way and I'm following the beer lines here, and then I'm going to poke it into the cooler here, and now we are looking pretty good. So I'm going to take a piece of the tape that we have for you here. This is pretty much made out of the same stuff as electrical tape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out a piece. I don't know, probably, let's say 8 inches, 10 inches long. And holding the power supply up against this, so I'm holding behind and I have it set at that length. I'm just going to put a little wrap around here that holds the power supply to the beer lines. So I've got the power supply taped in position, the grommet is in, drain line's down. The dispenser's going to flip forward, and you're going to kind of have to work everything, but you'll see as I'm going that this is going to sit just in this back space. So just in that back space, we've got the dispenser with the gap in the front. It is nice and neat. You do not attach it to the top of the cooler, because to work on it, you need to be able to flip it up. So if you see how the drain line is moving as I'm flipping it up, the inside, when we do our connections, we're going to leave just a little bit of slack on them as it comes through. So holes drilled, dispenser set up here, the drains attached, the tap display gets laid off to the right or left hand side. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. All right, the tap display for the 4 product is a single point mount. The 6 product ones arch, up and over the dispenser, that have 2 mounting positions where you have to drill 2 holes and line those up. The 4 product here, I measure 2 inches to the right of the dispenser and then 2 inches in front of the back of the dispenser to allow a 1/4 inch gap between the dispenser and the 3.5 inch flange here, and then the flange will be the same distance in front of the rear of the dispenser. You can mount it kind of wherever you want. You arch it up over the dispenser, so this is what it's going to look like here with the provided 7/8 hole saw. You want to drill this pilot bit here all the way through, but you do not want to use the hole saw on the top of the cooler yet, because you need it for the power supply. So since I'm up here and I have the drill up here, I'm going to drill my pilot hole for the tap display and move directly onto mounting the grommets for the power supply that's going to run out the back side of the cooler, or wherever you have a power source. You can bring the power supply out the right, out the left, depending on how the cooler is set up. The power supply needs to run outside of the cooler. So you can see up here, I've taken the 7/8 hole saw, I drilled a hole, and we have a bushing that we provide. Actually 2 of them, one goes on the inside, one goes on the outside. So you take your 7/8 hole saw, you drill a pilot hole through first. I made sure that there was nothing in the refrigeration cabinet I was going to run into. On the outside of the cooler is clear, so I snapped the grommet in here. Go to the other side, so I'm going to snap the grommet in, and I'm going to feed the cord through. All right, so the power cord is coming out the back, got the grommet on it. The power supply itself has 2 mounting hubs here, so plug it together. Grab my screws, the 1/8 inch loop clamps we have, and you're going to want to, I come straight down towards the bottom, right where it's going to turn, probably right here. Put a loop clamp power supply over, set it right along the bottom, being as close as you can to the power cabinet for the unit of the refrigeration unit, so that wherever the outlet is, you're already headed that direction. Put one more of these right here, give it some support. Oh, drop that one. Okay. All right, good to go. Next step is to mount the provided air bar with the CO2 regulator that's attached to it. It'll have the same amount of gas lines on it as you do beer lines. For this, I'm going to use my Sharpie. I have a drill with the little 1/8" pilot bit, so I can show you that process, and then I have our nut driver for the screws to mount it. When mounting this, you want to mount the air lines up so that they're going up towards where the beer lines from the dispenser are, because we have some clamps, some specialty clamps that we make to tie the corresponding beer line to the corresponding gas line so that it doesn't get tangled in here. Take your time laying it out, think about it, think about where kegs are going to go and whatnot. In this case, these shrouds that are over the top make it a little bit difficult to get it as high as you can. Normally, we'd be mounted up to where they come up towards where the ceiling is so that we can't run into them. I could mount it over to the right here, but then that gets pretty far away from the beer line. So you want to try to be mounted centered behind where the beer lines are. So in this case, I'm going to do it just right here. The Sharpie helps in this because it's hard to get in to the holes here because of the angle of it. The angle is designed to get the lines away from the wall. So what you do is you lay this up against the wall. You get it fit where you want it. So I'm going to be here. Get that out of the way, make sure I'm nice and level, and then I'm going to mark where my holes are. Especially if you have the stainless lined in coolers, you're going to need to mark the holes just like that. You're going to take your 1/8" bit, little pilot holes, being very accurate with where you drill them, and then this will allow you to take the tech screws that would drill through this type of material, but through stainless is really, really difficult. You can get them queued up here, and then I just push it all the way through. I get this side not tight all the way, right? Just leave it a little loose, leave its angle. Then I can go to this side over here. Same thing, right in there, but now I can tighten it down because we're all lined up. You can see I have all the other lines tucked up out of the way. The 2 cooling lines and the drain line are up and out. I have done lines 2, 3, and 4 here just to get an example of what it should look like when you're done. So the difference in length between the gas line and the beer line can cause a little bit of a challenge since everything's attached. The reason we attach everything is these are really nice specialty clamps that need a specialty tool to crimp them. It's all leak checked, everything like that. So being cognizant of that, you can manage the gas line if you connect the beer line and treat it appropriately. So what you're trying to go for on the end is you're trying to go for this nice loop of the beer line into the top. You don't want the gas line going up like this, because when you're on top of a keg, you can lose some of your clearance. So I'm going to show you the method to do that. But as you see, this one and then all the other 2 have this nice loop, and I've pushed the extra up into the top here, and I'll show you what I'm doing with that. So this is beer line number 1. You need to take your beer washer, put it inside of it. You then screw it onto the top of the keg coupler here. We're going to go finger tight, and we're going to use our crescent wrench or the adjustable pliers that we had. In this case, crescent wrench. With a gasket, you don't have to go super tight, so I'm hand tight, probably half turn, 3/4 turn right there. That should be good. I'm going to set this out of the way. And now we're going to be putting the clamps in. So the clamps themselves are 2 parts. So there is a back, which is has no screw holes that are drilled all the way through it. The front has holes that are going all the way through it. The pieces line up so that they create the shape of how the lines are going to be. So I'm going to show you how to put these in. I recommend taking the front and taking the Phillips screwdriver we provided and putting it in the hole and just giving it a quick spin. You don't have to push super hard, but this knocks the edge down to where you can take these little tiny screws and you get it pushed in there. I give it just a little bit of a turn to hold it. Do the same on this side because this makes it a lot easier to put the clamp on. So I've got the screws held in there. Now I can take the back of the clamp. The fat side goes on the gas line. So I got fat side on gas line, and I got the skinny side on beer line. Take the front, match it, screw it in. But you don't want to go tight because what you're going to want to be able to do is you're going to want to be able to slide it. So you put them all here where you're working. And then if you see down here, see how I'm all wonky on my lengths? So if I actually hold my beer line and I pull on the gas line, I just got pretty much the shape that I wanted. So now I'm going to work my clamp down, so work it towards the end here, probably about 8 inches away. And this is a little bit tight, so I'm going to just tug on the beer line just a hair while holding the gas line. Bring this together, and we've got a nice little loop there. So once you've done that, you take your screw, tighten your screw, and then we're going to put another clamp on. But do you see how I got this long kind of wiggly bit? So I got my end set, so I'm going to work my way this way. So I've got the top, give it a little bit of an action there, screw in, second one, set it down. I got my back here, get oriented, making sure that we're doing the same orientation as here. So I've got gas line on the right, beer on the left, match the top, screw it in loosely, and now this is going to get pushed up to the top. So I can see that if I kind of tuck my gas line right, we've made this nice controlled kind of curving bundle up here, but nothing's crossed and everything kind of nests with each other. So I've got these lined up, put the screws in it, if you don't manage your lines inside the keg cooler, you're going to be pretty upset at yourself after about 1 week of use. So once you change kegs, all these lines will get crossed up, and if you haven't managed them and thought about how you're going to use them and taken the time to lay them out here, it's going to be way harder to utilize the cooler, because when you change kegs, things get flopped over each other. You can see that all of these are numbered right here. I'm going to show you how to do that yourself. You know, a lot of people want to skip the little, final little fiddly steps, but if you do it all right now, take the extra, half an hour to set it up right, to do the quality setup for the life of the unit, you're going to experience all of the benefits of taking the time. So this is in here, right? You see everything looks kind of jumbly, but nothing's crossing. Everything is loose to go wherever it needs to go. Trick with the numbers is inside the clamp here, there's a little recess. So I'm just going to flip the sticker open. I'm going to try to touch as little of the back as I can. So I'm going to grab it with just the tip of my dominant hand index finger right in the bottom corner. So I got it right here. And what you're going to do is you physically push, maybe I can show on this one, you physically push the corner into the corner and then into the edge, and then it kind of lays itself down. So it's right inside that groove, and you use the groove to align your sticker. So take the sticker out, line it up, kind of pushing it into it nice and gently, and then just laying it down. This can be pretty fiddly. Take your time. If it's not lined up right, you can peel it out of there and try again. So I'm going to go number this one, and then we're going to move on to sticking these on. These mark the corresponding beer lines and gas lines, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the right. I made sure to keep that orientation. These go on the manifold, 3, 4. So everything's labeled now. I'll do these other 2 clamps here. Last 2 things to do are to install the cooling kit and the drain bucket. Hard to see with the column and stuff in the way. I'm trying to get the best angle I can. The braided lines that come down from the dispenser, they're the cooling loop. So one is send, one's return. It doesn't matter which one's which. The way that this cooling kit works, which is the cooling kit XL, is inside of it. There is a pump down at the bottom here. So when you get it, you're going to take the pump out. All the goodies are going to be inside of it. There's going to be 2 bottles of glycol. I have 1 here. The kit will come with some clamps and some tie wraps to do this installation. And then you can see on the top there's 2 90s and a power cord. The power cord, when we're done, will get routed back up to the dispenser and plugged into one of the circuit boards that's got an available power slot. The first step for this is it's designed to go in the corner. It's triangular, so you can put it in the corner and a keg can still fit in front of it. If your corners are full, you can flip it the other way, and the triangle shape here can be put flat against the wall, and you can put 2 kegs around it. So think about space utilization, but this is mandatory for using the dispenser. So you got to find a spot. After this, we'll do the drain line. So I'm just going to get these pointed in the direction of the cooling kit here. I'm going to take 2 of the clamps. I'm going to be in the way for a minute, but I'm going to take 2 of the clamps and some of the provided screws. And I'm going to mount these lines headed this way. So most coolers don't have this big shroud up here, so you can go straight across the back wall. You must be really careful with what you drill into, because there could be refrigeration lines or power in there. There's 2 screw clamps to attach each end of the lines. I like to pre-tighten them up a little bit so that they don't need as much on the clamp when they're in the position. So take both your clamps, get them ready. We have the tubing cutters that were provided in the kit. Line number 1, giving it a little bit extra length so that I can swing this bucket out of the corner, because once we're done, we need to fill it up with glycol and water, the 2 jugs of glycol, and then you have to fill it all the way to this line with water. That allows the amount of liquid in there to get refrigerated down and cool the unit and cool the beer lines that are outside the unit. So I got 1 line good here. I've got my clamp over it, putting it on the one in the back there. I'm not going to clamp it down yet because I want to make sure that I like my fit. I'm going to do this other line, making sure that I've got a little bit extra on it so it can match the line I just put on. Using the tubing cutter to give it a cut. Clamp. Then you're going to tighten both clamps down. I'm going to spare you watching me do that to show you the power wire. So now that that's in the corner, we cut the zip tie that is on the power line. It comes up from the pump. Extend it. Get it nice and straight. Then I'm going to use the tie wrap. Follow the cooling line. Up to the dispenser here. So the cooling kit in the corner is a lot more stable when it's full. This cooler is up on a lift, so I'm kind of at a weird angle. That's why it's wanting to fall all over the place, but it'll stay nicely in the corner out of your way. I've routed the power wire here. Routed the power wire here, following the beer lines, or excuse me, the cooling lines. And as you can see, they're going to follow them, and they're going to pop all the way up, back up to where the dispenser is. So I'm going to drop the lift down, and I'm going to show you how to manage it up on the top side. All right, so the power supply for the cooling kit pump is pushed up from the bottom here. This is why you have to make sure that to leave length on everything down there. because to work on it, you have to flip it up. So you can see everything kind of moves. Here's the cooling kit cord. I'll take the extra up here. I'm gonna plug it into this open port on the far right-hand side. The plug only fits in this port, and it is designed to power the little cooling kits that we have. So next thing to do is make sure down here that everything is routed correctly. I'm gonna pull the extra up. That looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna use the tie wrap that we have here. I'm gonna follow the beer lines. I like to tuck it kind of behind them here so that it's got a little place to live. And it's tucked behind. And I can get the little bit of loop here. I just take the little extra bit, tuck it together. We'll take our tie wrap. And they're just the right length for this, so you get it pushed through, give it a little squeeze, a little pull, and now the cooling kit is connected. We've got our power supply connected here, drain, all the beer lines are in. This bad boy sets down. Now it needs to stay mobile so that you can work on it, and for the NSF certification. All right, next step here, we got to run the drain line. So drains, beer, water, everything drains downhill. So from wherever the dispenser is to wherever the drain bucket is, we need to keep a nice downward slope to get there. This cooler, if I was to put it over here, we could put it over here, but we're taking up a lot of space on that side. That's already where a keg's gonna go. So on this cooler, there's a shelf over here on the left, and I'm gonna run the drain line over there and use the clamps that were provided. So I just point it in the direction that I'm going. If we were in a cooler without the shroud, you can go straight back to the back wall, left or right. And on this one, we want to remember that we got to be able to flip the dispenser up to work on it. So if you go really tight on your drain, you're not going to be able to flip it up very well. So I leave a little bit of a slope. I'm going to take my impact driver here, a couple of my screws, and we've got quite a few clamps to work with. So I'm going to actually go behind that. That looks like a pretty good angle to me. So I'm going to go here, and you got to kind of think about where you're screwing to match, to give you the chance to get another strap in on the same plane, I guess, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna put a screw in here. Okay, still going downhill, so I'll put one right there. That looks good. So another clamp. Get my cutters. So the thing that we have to notice here is that you want to leave a little bit going into the drain bucket, and you also got to understand that the tubing is going to want to pull the bucket or knock it over. So I'm going to go a little bit farther over, cut it a little bit long, get rid of the extra, so I can get one more strap on there so that the tubing itself will hold the drain in place. So I'm going to put the drain in the bucket here. And one right there. And there you go. So we've got a downhill drain going for here. Here's a little bit of a loop there. That's okay. Just adjust that. So drains ran. One thing I forgot to show is completing the tap display hole. So we pilot drilled earlier for it. The reason that we didn't drill this hole right away is that the hole saw that we provide you that is big enough to fit the tap display is also the hole saw that you need to use to do the grommet for the power supply. If you were to drill the top of the cooler and on the stainless, if you were to ruin the bit, you wouldn't be able to finish the install. So we have you save this till last. You also want to drill from the inside up and then the outside down to make nice holes. If you drill from the upside all the way through, you can create some flaring on the bottom side and a really sharp edge. It's still going to be kind of sharp, but the tap display will go through there and protect the hole. You also can use a 1/2-inch drill bit, but it can cause the same issue. But here we go. So not a lot of pressure to start, letting the saw do the work. I'm only pushing hard enough until I really just see some shaving, and then there we go. So now I'll drill the top. All right, now that I've got the install done and everything is done moving around and wiggling all over the place, I glue the little hole covers on. Now you need to let them dry overnight, so you need to make sure to do this and be able to let it sit so that the silicone can cure. So here's the 2 discs. We've got a little just tube of silicone here. Use my razor knife, cut the tip off. And then I do a big fat bead around the hole. It's going to pookie out when you push down on it. You want it to do that. Don't touch it. Let it dry. Come back with a razor blade, and you can cut right around the outside with a nice sharp blade, and it will peel right off. So I got that one done. So coming over here, big fat bead on this daddy. Like I said, on stainless steel here, doesn't matter if it overflows because you can just let it cure, come back later, trace around the outside, or score, excuse me, around the outside with a razor knife, and then you'll be good. So those are glued down. Give them a little bit of a press, let them dry, and you'll be ready to go. Display's in, dispenser's in. We've got the power supply plugged in. Last thing to do really is just to turn on the dispenser itself. I'm going to turn on each of the circuit boards here. I'm going to put the cup couplers on and show you guys just a quick run through without beer hooked up on how to do a system check here to make sure that at least your wiring and the dispenser itself is right. Got all that. I've got the tray out still so that it doesn't flip out when we set this thing down. So in auto mode, with nothing on, when you slide the coupler down, you should see the 2 LEDs come on, and then the valve's going to click open and click close. There's no beer coming out or anything like that because we don't have anything hooked up. So we've got all of that is functioning. The cooling kit itself, you can, the pump should be running, and the way you tell that is you can actually feel the jug and you can feel the little bit of the vibration of the pump. So now that you got everything installed, everything powered up, you just need to put cold kegs in it, put your regulator on the canister. On the regulator itself, we've got a sticker, 12 to 15 psi off on all of that, and you should be ready to go.